Hello everyone, what's up? It's me again, Junkmaster3, and what do you know, it's time for yet another video, and this video today is going to be about my favorite horror movies from the year 1996. Obviously I'm going to move on to 97 eventually, and then 98, and then 99. Then I'm considering to make like a top 10 list for each year in the 2000s and in the 70s as well. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, this is my top 10 favorite horror movies from the year 1996. And yeah, this is just my personal opinion, so no reason to get mad. But anyway, let's begin right away. At number 10, we have the movie called Children of the Corn 4. For some weird reason, this specific release says it's called The Deadly Harvest, but I think the original title is actually Children of the Corn 4, The Gathering, I believe. Um, by saying that, I still think this film is fine for what it is, but I do prefer the previous ones, like the part 1, 2, and 3 over this one. This one is still good. I mean, part 5 I didn't like at all. I think that's like probably my least favorite in that entire series, if you don't count some of the newer ones. Um, but this one has some small connection with the other movies in general. I mean, you still have the whole like he who walks by in the rose as like the main villain, you could say. But in this way, in this movie, kind of like takes the form of a child. So I believe he's supposed to have. I'm not really sure if that's really the origin story or not, because this series is just really weird when it comes to the storylines, and they kind of jump back and forth between like who he who walks by and there was, is that just really a person or is that just a demon? But yeah, Shield of the Corn for The Gathering I think is still a fine movie in this series in general. I don't want to say too much about it if you haven't seen the previous ones, even though most of them are kind of standalone. They kind of just hint towards some of the earlier stuff in general. But yeah, Shield of the Corn for The Gathering at number 10. And then at number 9, we have a movie which is just like the definition of dark humor, you could say. Really dark humor. And it is the lovely movie called Ebola Syndrome with Anthony Wong, which is quite surprisingly because I think Anthony Wong also obviously appeared in the movie called The Untold Story, which I think made my top 10 1993 video as well, like that horror movies from that year. Some people would probably not maybe like consider this a horror movie, but I still think this is kind of horrific just what this guy is really doing. So he's been infected by Ebola, and he just goes on a weird, crazy rampage throughout like the streets right here. So, and that's pretty much it for the storyline. I mean, it just sounds really. I mean, it is really horrific, but at the same time, it has some really weird and kind of funny, really dark humor to it. So if you don't like dark humor in general, stay away from this film because it's fairly disgusting and disturbing to a certain degree. So, but anyway, Ebola Syndrome at let's see, number 9, yeah. And then at number 8, I mean, this is once again a movie. Would you really say this is a horror film or not? I mean, I still think it has enough horror elements to it to make it like a horror film. And it is the movie called Killers right here, which until I saw this particular release, I had no idea this was even released on DVD or Blu-ray, because this one did pop up from time to time on some of those like Lost on VHS videos on YouTube. So I saw this one like online, and a good friend of mine actually sent this to me. Thank you for that, by the way. So I've always wanted to see this one in general. So the best way I could describe this is basically it feels like a more horror-esque type of version of Natural Born Killers, you could say. It has a lot of similarities with that, but obviously this is a much lower budget, and it doesn't really have as many like memorable like actors in it. So it doesn't really have that star power. So obviously, Natural Born Killers is the better film, but I think this is a nice sort of like horror type of version of that. Obviously, this is definitely more of an action film maybe than a horror film, but I would still consider this to have enough horror elements to it to make it into this list. So, yeah. Anyway, Killers. I mean, I don't really like the title Killers because I think that sounds very generic in general. But yeah, Killers. I mean, it's a really entertaining film nonetheless. So yeah, from on number 8. So yeah. Then we have a number 7 is like a sort of a sequel. I mean, you could say this is sort of like a standalone type of sequel to the previous one, but it is Tales from the Crypt, Bordello of Blood. Obviously, like sort of like a standalone sequel to Demon Knight. I do prefer Demon Knight over this one, but this is still a very entertaining like sequel in a way. Usually when you make sequels, they tend to be really bad from time to time, but this one is actually pretty darn entertaining. Um, I remember the best thing I remember about this one is that you have some really funny and hilarious moments with Corey Feldman in this one, and the Crypt Keeper himself is always hilarious. Now he's completely lost track what I was about to say, but if you have seen the first one and you haven't seen this one, yeah, definitely check this one out. Has lots of really fun, nice like comedic parts in it as well. Nice blend of horror and comedy in that one. So yeah, Bordello of Blood at number 7. And then on number 6, we have a Stephen King story, or like based on his novel or whatever, or based on a book by him. And this is fairly underrated. I don't really hear a whole lot of people talk about this one. And this is directed by none other than Tom Holland, who directed the original Child's Play film and one of my absolute favorite vampire films of all time, Fright Night. And this is his film called Thinner, right here. I'm not really sure. Yeah, it is 96. I just had to double check on that. But Thinner is basically about this guy who's like really, he's kind of like obese, you could say. And he kind of like messes around with these Indians, and he treats them really bad. And he's just like a real jerk in general, up until when he gets actually like a curse put on him by this shaman. I think, I'm not really sure if we call him a shaman, but basically like the leader of this Indian tribe, basically. So after a while, he just gets thinner and thinner and thinner. No matter how much he's eating, he just keeps getting smaller and smaller and thinner and thinner. And obviously, after a while, he just gets really dangerous. So I think it's a really entertaining and cool premise for a film, or especially like for a book in general. But I think this sadly is very overlooked in general. I mean, it's not the greatest like Stephen King adaptation out there, but I think it's very overlooked, and not a whole lot of people talk about this one in general. So. But anyway, if you haven't seen this film, go check it out. Thinner, yeah, really entertaining. At number 6, and at number 5, we have like a slasher film, which I mean, maybe that's the reason why it's fairly high up on this list, because I'm a big fan of slasher movies in general. And I believe this is directed by none other than Brian Usna, who directed Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein. He directed Bride of Reanimator. That's what I wanted to say. Obviously, he's made lots of other really entertaining movies in here, but that's the first one that comes to mind. But this is his film called The Dentist. And this is actually like a Swedish release of the film, because this is just, it has the Swedish title on it right there. I do have the sequel as well. I don't think the sequel is as good, but this one, the first one, is really entertaining. Once again, it has some really funny parts to it, but I'm not really sure if those were meant to be, if those were intentional or not. But nonetheless, this has really brutal kills in it, and it's just like the whole premise for this, that this dentist just goes absolutely berserk and crazy, is kind of a scary thought in general, because he kind of lets his like private life take over, and then obviously that just goes into absolute chaos after a while. I mean, yeah, like I said before, I have the sequel as well, not as good, but still entertaining. I kind of wish they made a trilogy about this one. Obviously, it's been too long since part 2, so there's no real reason to do that anyway. But I wish they could have made a part 3 much closer onto part 2, you could say. So, because I think this character is quite memorable in general. And once again, this is a pretty underrated film in general as well, that not a whole lot of people talk about anymore. But yeah, The Dentist from 96, of course, but it's a number 5. That's what I wanted to say. And then at number 4, we have, which I would say is one of the best werewolf films of all time. I mean, that might be sounds like really crazy, but I really enjoy this film. My favorite werewolf films are obviously like American Werewolf in London, The Howling, Dog Soldiers, Ginger Snaps, and then probably this one as well. Silver Bullet also comes to mind, but this one is definitely in that league. And it's the movie called Bad Moon right here. And like, I've probably already spoiled it. This is like a werewolf film, but I mean, I don't really spoil it too much, because just look at that cover art. I mean, that pretty much tells you what this movie is all about. Really nice atmosphere, really memorable characters, likable characters. Really nice German Shepherd dog. I really remember that dog being really likable as well. I know it's weird to say that with like a animal character, but I really like the dog in this one. And I think this is like one of the, I would say probably the best performance ever by Michael Paré. Michael Paré, I can never pronounce his name, because he, I think just a couple of years after this one, he turned up in most of those pretty average, stupid, like You Were Ball films. But I don't want to spoil too much about this one in general. But if you haven't seen Bad Moon in general, I would say give it a watch. I'm not really sure where you can find it because I think this is actually a Swedish release of the film. But I remember this one being, I think this is pretty hard to come across these days. But I remember I got all of this like years and years and years ago for a very very good price. So not really sure how easy it is to come across in the US or in the UK or whatever, but yeah, Bad Moon, definitely one of the better like werewolf films out there. Let's see here. Then we have number 3. We have a Peter Jackson movie, the also somewhat underrated movie called The Frighteners. This is actually the 3-disc special edition director's cut. I've never seen the director's cut before, so maybe I should have like brought up the other release I have of this film, because I'm not even sure if the theatrical cut is like included in this particular version or not. But it's actually on the back that it's a thriller comedy. I didn't know thrillers and comedy could be like in the same word. I mean, that sounds just really weird. I mean, horror comedy makes more sense to me. That's what I would categorize this as. Obviously, this has much bigger budget than his previous movies in general, like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles and Dead Alive, or also known as Brain Dead. Um, and I think this one is so good because of the cast. You have like Michael J. Fox playing like this sort of like detective guy, I believe. Or like ghost hunter, you could say he is. He's actually called Frank Bannister. The character's name is Frank Bannister. And you also have Jake Busey basically playing like this maniac who's like kind of like brought back from the dead in a way. And really funny elements to it. I mean, you probably see a pattern here. I'm a sucker for some of those horror comedies in general. So if you've liked any of the previous movies made by Peter Jackson, I think you'd definitely enjoy this one as well. And when I say previous, I obviously refer to his older films like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles and Dead Alive and all those. Because obviously after this one, I think right after this one, he directed, I think it was the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I can be totally wrong about that, but The Frighteners nonetheless has an amazing atmosphere to it. I'll probably watch this during the October month as well, because I watched this a couple of years ago for the first time and I just really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, The Frighteners at number 3. Yeah. And at number 2, we have a movie which needs no real introduction in general, because everyone has already been talking about this film to death on YouTube and like everywhere on social media. But you have Wes Craven's Scream at number 2. And I still think this is the best one in the entire Scream series. But keep in mind, I haven't watched anyone after part 4. I do have those films in my collection, but I've yet to watch them. Some friend of mine said that he didn't really like those, and maybe that's the reason why I kind of like put them off altogether. Obviously, you should never do that. You should judge for yourself, but that's probably the reason why I've still yet to watch those films. But the first one, I think, is an amazing film. Second one is great. Third one is probably the weakest one so far that I've seen. Part 4 is better than part 3, but not as good as part 1 and 2, in my personal opinion. But yeah, I mean, the ghost mask, like Ghostface, is iconic, and I think this is so like, it has a nice like blend of like the comedy and the serious like horror stuff in general, and like it's sort of like a spoof on the entire like slasher like genre in general. And at the time, it was kind of refreshing to do something like that, because in the 90s in general, like slashers were basically like just no-go zone, because I mean no one really wanted to make slasher movies anymore, because I mean the 80s were just filled with them. But this one kind of like reinvented that genre in general, and right after this one you got movies such as I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, Valentine, and some of those films that followed this one. So it's really thanks to this film that you got some of those other films. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say, but I mean, obviously this is not the first spoof type of like horror film, you could say, because there's another older film from the early 80s called Student Bodies, which was kind of like the first to spoof this slasher genre in general. But anyway, you can't say anything else. This is an amazing film and nice blend of horror and comedy and memorable characters and great acting in all together. So yeah, Scream by Wes Craven. And at number one, we have a film which I would say this has a nice blend of action and horror. At first, when you start watching this film, you're like, well, wait a minute, this can't be a horror film. This is just like a full-blown like crime action type of film, or gangster film. I'm not really sure how we can categorize it, but it is the movie called From Dusk Till Dawn. I love this film. I mean, I've seen it so many times, and I love the fact that it kind of like fools you into this film, because just by watching this particular like front cover, you think, oh, it's just an action film with George Clooney and Tarantino. And then once you realize that this is actually like a horror film or like a blend of that, you get blown away right off the bat when you see some of those things. No pun intended. Blown bat. What did you say? Never mind. That was just probably a stupid joke anyway. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but yeah, nice blood and gore effects. I mean, the acting is really amazing, and it's pretty fun to see Quentin Tarantino in this role. He's just a complete scumbag. George Clooney is also sort of like a scumbag in this film, because both of them play like these two brothers, and they're like out on like a killing rampage, basically, or like they're basically criminals in general, and they're just, I mean, at first they're really, really unlikable. You don't sympathize with these characters, but especially George Clooney's character, you kind of like bond a little bit with after a while. You kind of like feel sorry for him to a certain degree, even though you know he's a scumbag. Yeah, and you also have Harvey Keitel and Juliette Lewis as well. Amazing actors, all of them, and really fun cameo type of roles by Tom Savini and Danny Trejo. And Freddie Williamson is also in this. Was amazing cast in general, amazing. I do believe John Saxon also has a small cameo as well, which is kind of fun to see. But yeah, this one also had some sequels that came out like a couple of years later, From Dusk Till Dawn 2 and 3, and then I think also they made like a miniseries or TV series, which I haven't seen actually, but I remember the sequels were obviously not as good as the first one, but they were kind of okay for what they were. I remember I didn't like the second one that much. I think I actually prefer the third one over the second one in this trilogy, if you can even call it a trilogy. But yeah, and obviously, I mean, the part 2 and 3 are kind of like standalone sequels, so you don't really need to. You don't have too much connection with the previous films. I mean, sort of small connection, sort of like the Children of Corn franchise as well. They're just kind of muddled when it comes to the storyline. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen From Dusk Till Dawn, do yourself a favor and check this one out. It's really, really entertaining and fun. So there you have it. That's my top 10 of 1996, like horror movies from 1996. I'm not really sure when I'm gonna upload 1997. I'm gonna get to that one eventually. But if you like this video, give it a like. If you would like to follow me on YouTube, or if you like my content in general, feel free to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my videos. So, but anyway, hope you enjoyed this particular video, and see you next time. Bye bye.